Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Inside Scoop. This is a Loss Prevention Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Stefanie Hoover, and I'm here today with Mike Lamb. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I know you and I have crossed paths, and I think are we best friends now? Is that what happened?
I think we are officially. Yeah. We've crossed that bridge.
We've crossed that bridge. But it was a great meeting. It was so good to see you there, and thank you for joining me today. Mike, you and I did a little pre-call, and I think we're going to focus on mentorship as a topic of our podcast, which is it's near and dear to my heart. We've written a lot of articles recently about this, and I think we're going to continue to kind of drive that point home through the magazine, through digital, and through print. But as somebody who's been in the industry for how many years? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
well, I'm gonna date myself here, but I was active in the industry for about 44 years. I have been out now for about a year and a half. So long time.
Long time.
A long time.
You say you're out, but I don't think I believe you.
Well, I'm not officially working for any company, but I am so, as you know, I'm very passionate about this industry. I'm so proud to have been a part of it. And I like to stay connected for a number of reasons, but yeah, it's all good.
How many people do you think you've mentored? If you had to just take a wild guess.
Well, what's interesting that I have found is I'll run into people that maybe they were a regional or even a market leader in asset protection for one of the companies that I had the privilege of leading in AP. And they're like, well, you had such an influence on my career. And I really didn't even realize it. So I think it's, for me to be able to put a number on it would be very difficult. And I am so blessed that I get compliments like that. And it makes me feel so good because this topic of mentorship and the fact that you and the magazine are focused on, I think is critically important. We had at the Leadership Summit a good session on that. And I think all of us, certainly me included, can do more to mentor the future leaders of this industry because, they are our future. And there's some very bright men and women out there leading AP, and there's even brighter people that will step in as we move forward. So this notion of mentorship is a big deal. And I've had a great privilege of leading larger teams. And just your influence by how you act or what you say or what you do sometimes means a whole lot more than you might realize.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes those little things can really make a big impact. Little interactions, conversations. You're talking about large teams, like the scale of a team. When you were working in retail, what was the largest team that you led?
Well, it would have been Walmart. As you know, they have legions of personnel. They have a lot of stores. Walmart US. When I was there, between the neighborhood market format and the super centers, and then their standard boxes, we probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 stores. And, these are big boxes for the most part, certainly the super centers among them. And, you staff those stores with a lot of personnel. So I think at one point, if you included this door protection program we put in place that we dubbed More at the Door, probably in the neighborhood of 25,000 people.
Wow.
In fact, that team was so large, Stephanie, we actually did a satellite broadcast. And we dubbed that broadcast Same Page because when you have a team that large, the importance of communication, clear communication, expectations on things that were designed for us to be successful. There's a lot of avenues, but we had the privilege of doing that. And I think that's where you have an opportunity to demonstrate, no matter who you are, your leadership competencies. And we tried to be very open with this broadcast. In fact, the last half hour of the broadcast, we opened it up for phone calls. And we broadcast live. This wasn't taped. We used to kid the team, and I used to kid the team that we all had a face for radio. But it was a lot of fun doing those broadcasts because I think it really galvanized the team and connected the team.
Excellent. Anything weird ever happen on those? Like spur of the moment?
Well, one of the funniest things, at least in my opinion, we're doing this broadcast, and it's like August, of the fiscal year, which ends end of January, and one of the guys that was on my team, Joe Throtter, who's still over at Walmart, very successful career there. He turns to me on this broadcast and says, "Mike, we understand that you've agreed to shave your head if we make our shrink budget this year. Well, I hadn't agreed to anything. So here we
Oh.
are at the spur of the moment. And I kind of grinned and I said, I'll do it. And quite honestly, I didn't think we'd make shrink plan. Not that we didn't want to, not that we were pushing hard to do it. I just didn't think we would. Well, sure enough, we made shrink budget. So we had a national meeting later that year, and in front of 600 people, the district level folks and above, we had a lady come in that shaved my head, and we called it Cheer the Lamb. So that was one of the most kind of awkward and funny moments, but we had a good time. It was had such great experiences at Walmart. It's a super company. I learned a lot there. And, Walmart's one of those places where if something's going to happen, it generally does happen at a Walmart location. So you have to really be positioned to not only be reactive, but proactive. But it was a great run at Walmart. I really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah. Now, when you were shaved down, was it down to the skin, or was it just like?
I cheated a little bit, Stephanie. I got to be honest. I think my wife had a big influence on, if you come home with a completely bald head, there's going to be problems on the home front. But it was. I wish I still had the CD, because we taped this on a CD, and I don't know what I did with it. I kept it, and then I've misplaced it over the years. But she took a significant amount of hair off my head. I'll be honest. I had a little bit of a mohawk thing going.
Yeah.
And then she kind of sprayed that Walmart blue. It was.
I love it.
Yeah. It was humbling, and it was also very enjoyable.
Nice. I love the fact that you guys used, you had the platform, you have the ability to talk to the team, as a whole. What about companies that really just don't have that ability? I know it's easy to mentor, or easier or less difficult to mentor people when they're in the corporate office, right? You have exposure to them every day. How do you make sure that mentorship and building that bench is happening out in the field when you don't have that ability to sort of broadcast that message like that?
Yeah. Well, I think one, it has to be very intentional, right? You have to be focused on it. You have to be committed to mentorship, not only the people that represent your direct reports, but that group and then their direct reports. And it's interesting you asked that question, because when I transitioned from Walmart with literally thousands of personnel, I went to the supermarket industry at Kroger, where we had a much smaller team. Now, granted, we had a lot of resources, maybe 1,000 in total across the stores, but far fewer than I had the benefit of leading over at Walmart. So I think part of it is being present. Don't sit behind the desk. We logged a lot of miles, made a lot of trips. We're in the stores a great deal. We tried to message on a routine basis. We tried to make performance management and succession planning a very key focus for the teams. We'd have mid-year updates. If you had someone new, you'd have a 90-day update. And I think it has to be very intentional, because you can promise your way to anything. The proof's in the pudding. And could I have done better? Most certainly. But and your human resources teams and the partnership with them help provide that framework so that you have this focus on mentorship. We have the 9-box grid where you place personnel in those boxes, and you're always hoping for the movement of those individuals to that upper right quadrant, which said they're ready now, or they're in a position if they can be promoted. But I will say this too: some people are very content doing what they do, and you sort of have to understand the individual. What's their personal ambition? There were folks that they were hourly who'd look at me and say, "I want your job," and I thought that was great, and that's the right attitude. There may be others that say, look, my family's here in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's home. I don't really have an ambition to move. I want to be the best I can be with what I'm doing here. And that was fine too, because the measure of your success is not necessarily the ambition to go higher. It's, are you doing your job day to day? And are you delivering on the expectations that your organization and the department has of you? So that was kind of how we viewed it. But it has to be intentional. And I've had people, I've confessed to folks, I don't think I did a really good job mentoring. And they're like, nah, I think you did better than you thought, which makes me feel good. But, it's like anything we do, career-wise or otherwise, you're never as good as you want to be. And I think it's very refreshing that, like this podcast, you're focused on the importance of mentorship and growth and development.
Right.
What I have found, and I seem to be seeing more and more of each day, is increased demand on AP teams. You might recall at the Leadership Summit, there was a question about, is AP becoming more or less relevant? And I think that largely depends on the leader of the department. Do you understand the scope, the mission, the vision of the broader company? Do you have an insatiable appetite to do more and to take on more and to demonstrate the importance of your department? And for those AP leaders, those women and men that are in those roles that do that, I think these jobs are becoming bigger and bigger and more relevant than they've ever been. I think if you cower away from that and you don't reach for that, then it probably is going to get passed to someone else in another department. So I think COVID was a year of inflection, that 18-month period where suddenly you went from managing day-to-day shrink, whether that was malicious loss or operational loss, to, if you were an essential business like grocery, how do we keep stores open? How do we deep clean the stores? How do we understand traffic and flow of traffic into a store when you had metering and you can only have so many people in a store at a given time? And I think that brought EP teams closer to the other departments in retailing. And it required much more of a demand on AP. And the really good teams stood up big there and demonstrated that they were certainly capable, willing and capable of doing more.
I think times of stress like that, which was that was unprecedented, really kind of makes the cream rise to the top, right? Like people, you're either going to grow or you're going to die. It's you can't just remain stagnant. And I think that was one of the things I was going to talk with you about too, is how this is kind of continues to be unprecedented times, right? There's economic uncertainty, people are getting laid off left and right. How do leaders continue to be an innovator, continue to be change agents in these times like this? Like I think there was maybe a tendency to want to put their head down and hide a little bit and try to weather the storm, but that's not a good option either.
It's like the old analogy: are you playing defense or offense? I think you have to play offense, right? You have to demonstrate that you have a willingness to do more, to seek more. You have to understand, I think, the importance of relationships cross-functionally, whether that's with your privacy teams, your legal teams, your HR teams, your operations teams, your financial teams. And so I do think, and I'm not trying to indict the industry that I grew up in, but I do think that sometimes we demonstrate too much of a risk-averse approach versus, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail forward. And that's what we generally tried to do in the three companies that I led is, look, I'm going to try to be innovative. I'm going to pursue things. I'm not going to let really good get in the way of perfect. And I'm going to leverage technology. And the other thing I would tell you is any company I've ever worked for, and that includes, the old department store days and Home Depot and then Walmart and then Kroger. It's really all about the customer experience, and it really boils down to three things: are you in stock? Do you have the product? Are you friendly? And are you fast? It's really those three things that really drive the business. So anytime you can introduce technology or a program or a strategy that not only helps you with profit and safety, but also helps complement the customer experience, then you're thinking about the right stuff.
Right.
And I think sometimes we get too narrow-minded in the approach, and it's like, I'm not going to take the risk. I'm not going to play to win. I'm going to play not to lose. And I think you got to play to win, because if you play not to lose, I think you're going to lose more often than you win.
Yeah, and I think it starts to be almost like a cancer. So when we start to say, when other departments come to us for help, or when we start to say no, or we're too busy, or we're too thin, that becomes the reputation, right? Okay, LP is not going to be helpful, or they're too tied up or too busy. So then that becomes just sort of the way that it is. I think it's like a self-defeating prophecy almost. To your point, with the narrow-minded vision a little bit, yeah.
Well, when I was at Kroger, we had a wonderful relationship with our merchant partners. And I
Hmm.
didn't run to them and say, look, let's manage shrink. It was like, how can we work together to sell more and lose less?
Right.
Or in some cases, sell a lot more and lose the same. Because either
Hmm.
way, I'm winning. The shrink's measured as a rate of sale. And like things like locking up product, which I think you guys may be doing a piece on that in the near term.
Yeah.
Uh, I used to try to pursue with the merchants, what are the technologies that we can put in place that will unlock sales,
Hmm.
but yet at the same time help protect the product in a way that we can all be successful. And I've seen some departments where they're so stuck on, I'm going to lock it up. Sorry, I got to protect it. And the merchants, and there's this rub,
Yeah.
between being loss prevention or sales prevention. And I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it can be both. And I think that's where technology and all the solutions that we see today, and there's a myriad of them, are really going to be the future of our industry on how do we unlock sales and how do we make it right for the good customer.
Yeah.
I used to have this saying, we don't want any dolphin in the tuna net, right? So when we put something out there, we got to protect our good customer, because if we don't do that, then it's self-defeating.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that retailers are speeding up their decision making on technology, which is great to see. I think we've always had a reputation, and I did sales for a while too, of being very slow to make decisions in retail and very cautious on trying new technology. I feel like that's changing. Are you seeing that?
Well, candidly, I did for a period of time, but I'm not so much in the last year or so. It seems like
Okay.
businesses are being a whole lot more calculating in where they invest and how they invest. And I think it goes
True.
back to the comment of, I don't want a singular solution that just helps me address an issue of loss. I
Hmm.
want a solution that covers a number of bases in the business, whether that's I'm faster at the register, I can be friendlier to the good customer. Friendlier maybe I'm just not locking it up, right? I can walk in and grab it. And I think everybody's in line for capital monies. CapEx and
Hmm.
OpEx are precious monies in today's environment in retail. And if you don't have a compelling story, and that was one of the pieces I really enjoyed at our conference, was this notion of, how do you sell your product as an AP leader? How do you get in front of the merchant that's trying to get something done, or finance or marketing or whoever it may be, in such a way that the business says that's the priority investment and we want to make it. And I think when you can tie it to other things other than just pure loss, I think that's where you come out on the winning side. But I think there's a lot more of a calculated approach. I was talking to one senior vice president of an AP organization just recently, and I won't name him for the purpose of anonymity, but they were like, we have a shrink challenge. We're going to pursue the shrink challenge. We're going to have technology and solutions help us, but we're going to be very, very thoughtful about when, where, and how much. And I think that kind of is setting the tone of what we're seeing right now. And I think based on company size, there's companies that have sourcing departments, procurement departments, privacy leans in. You've got operations that has to buy off. You have finance that has to buy off.
Hmm.
And while all these are critical functions, they don't speak to expediency. You're not turning overnight. Now, bear in mind, I came from 3 large companies, so I think smaller companies where one person may play 3 roles instead of 3 people playing 3 roles, you might move a little quicker. So I have to be careful that I don't frame everything in the size of a Walmart, a Home Depot, or a Kroger. But yeah, I think we're still making those investments, and it can be mind-boggling, can it? I mean, go to
Yep.
this January show at the NRF, or go to NRF, their AP show, or REGA. You walk in these exhibit halls and there's hundreds of solutions,
Right.
and many compete with one another. So how do you dissect that? How do you land on what it is you want? And then how do you go about bringing it to life? And then how do you go about its continued measurement? I think
Yep.
those are still challenges today for our industry.
Yeah, there's just a ton of information flowing constantly. I don't even know how a leader today parses all that information to like, how do you find the best solution? If you're walking into that show, I mean, where do you even go?
Well, this goes back to what you said in our pre-call, and that is allow your team to help you with these things, right?
Excellent. Yeah.
I was the vice president at Kroger. I had a director that had a person that reported to him, and he was responsible for vetting some of these solutions and then bringing them to us, explaining what it was, how it worked, would it benefit our organization, and then those are the first steps, the genesis of how something comes to life. So, because you can't do it all yourself, and I think that goes back to this whole notion of micromanagement. I think that's an illness, right? I mean, I think freedom within a framework. Like any of my direct reports, when they demonstrated the ability to do their jobs, I got out of their way. And I was only going to step in when I felt like maybe they were a bit off course or they weren't performing to the expectation that I felt that role that they held needed. But otherwise, let them run. And, don't be critical of the first mistake they make either. I just know that of all the bosses I ever reported to, the ones I admired the most allowed me that freedom. I knew there was a framework, but I was not micromanaged.
Right.
So, if you have this philosophy of, treat others in the way in which you'd like to be treated, then that kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I had great direct reports. There's so many people now that are vice presidents in this industry that worked on my teams that in many cases I didn't hire them. I just, in some cases I inherited them, but let them do their jobs. And it's okay not to be perfect every time out, right? And what's the old saying? You're gonna make an omelet. You got to break a few eggs. And
right.
So I truly believe in that. Let people grow. Give them the mentorship. The really good ones that grew were the ones that were always seeking feedback too. You didn't have to run them down for feedback.
Right.
They would say, "Hey, look, you allowed me to lead this call today. How do you feel it went? And what, if anything, would you have done differently?" And that's all about just self-development and self-promotion, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think people who are curious too, right? Those are the ones who seem to accelerate faster in their careers. Yeah. So I want to back up to mentorship sort of like at the beginning level. And this is something as a team at the magazine we've been talking about. In the past, like when I first started at LP, I worked in a department store, right, where I could get mentorship one-on-one right out of the gate and course correct immediately. As somebody right out of college, and even in college, I worked in a department store. I was clueless, and I was screwing up and doing things I shouldn't do. Thank God I had a mentor and somebody there with me. So we were wondering, like, is that still happening? Because I know department stores are not as big as they used to be. How are people getting that early intervention, that early mentorship?
Yeah, it is arguably perhaps more difficult today than it has been in the past, because I had a very similar career path. I was going to school at UT in Knoxville, and I started in the department store industry. And thank God I had smart men and women around me that guided me and helped me along the way. I think it depends on your vertical. Like, let's use Walmart as an example. If you hire into Walmart, you're going to be surrounded by a team of store personnel and AP that are already there. So you're going to get that. But if you make a transition at a mid-level manager role and you're coming into like a Kroger, which is grocery, which is a different animal than mass merchandising or certainly home improvement, then you have to seek your mentors, right? You have to look around and say, who's out there that I know can give me solid counsel, and someone that I can seek feedback from. But it's like we said on the front end, you got to work at it. Even your own personal mentorship has to be something that you're focused on as an individual, right? I mean, for me, what I always tried to do was I looked at the really great leaders, and I looked at the really poor ones that I had the privilege of working with or for over the years. I always tried to emulate those characteristics of those that I admired, and I tried at all costs to never emulate those that I felt weren't strong in leadership roles. And when you've been in it for 44 years, you get really great leaders, you get really not so great leaders, and you get awful leaders, right? Or over the years, at whatever level.
Right.
And so for me, it's pattern your behavior after those you admire. Like Frank Blake, I thought was one of the most preeminent and successful CEOs that Home Depot ever put in place. You know, we had the Bob Nardelli era. The business was struggling. He came in and resurrected that organization. And he was a man of the people. You know, he's one of those types that, and I believe this to be true, that people will do more for you than they will in spite of you. It's easy to be the boss. It's hard to be the leader. And so I admired those qualities of Frank. He used to personally handwrite notes to people who had business accomplishments or even personal accomplishments. And he'd take the time to do that. He was, again, a man of the people. We'd have national meetings and Frank would take the stage and, you know, you'd have 5,000 store manager or 5,000 attendees and you couldn't get them to sit down. You'd have a 10-minute standing ovation.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I want to be like that guy, you know?
Right.
So I think as a mentor, that's what you got to do. You got to pursue it yourself. Look, I mean, I'm probably the least talented guy in the industry, but I stayed hungry on trying to move myself along, right? And do the right things, say the right things. What's the old cliche? Do the right thing when nobody's watching, and try to live by that as much as you can. So anyway,
one of the things that I've learned about you, Mike, is that you tell stories really well. You illustrate your point really well, and you have, I don't want to call them cliches, but you have kind of like homilies or whatever you want to call them. Like,
well, they're called lambisms, Stefanie. You can get with Chris McCarrick over at Kroger. I think he has an entire glossary of my lambisms. Some of which I have shamelessly stolen, and some of which I have developed on my own. But there's a lot of them.
That's okay. But I think that's one of the reasons why you've been such a great mentor. I mean, that's something that I struggle with. I don't find myself to be a very good storyteller. So I think I struggle a little bit when I try to mentor folks. It's like, how do I get my point across without sound like I'm lecturing all the time? What kind of advice could you give somebody like me? Like, I'm more of an introvert too. Like, how could I be more?
I don't think you have to be a great storyteller to be a great mentor. I do think practical application, and when you've had so many experiences in the industry as I've had, you've got things you can draw on, right? Now, I didn't have them early on, but you pick them up along the way, and it's a funny thing. I had people that worked on teams for me that had the highest level of technical ability and operational knowledge that you could ever imagine, but they struggled with the leadership because they couldn't put the two together. And it's not impossible. I mean, and you have to work on on where you think your weaknesses are. But I will tell you this: there's a guy that Frank Blake used to bring in at Home Depot. I think it was Stanley. He's a minister, and he was and his father was in the ministry for years and years, and his father may have passed recently. But he'd come in and lecture to the officers, and I'd sit in those meetings, and he would say, "Look, focus on your strengths." I mean, I kind of look at you and I see a person that's dedicated to being successful. I look at you and see a person that, if you're on my team, I want you to contribute, and people are going to appreciate that. The people that you want on your team are going to appreciate that. Maybe the ones that you don't want on your team won't. But they're going to appreciate that. So we all lead in different ways with different nuance. And it doesn't have to be because you're a great storyteller. I do think retail's a people business, right? And, I used to tell my team, it's perfectly fine to laugh on company time. We're not curing cancer, right? We're not splitting the atom.
Right.
So we can have a little fun along the way. But, we have to be serious about we're here to deliver results, and you have to have a plan to do it. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can still have a great plan. You can still be successful, and you can still laugh your way through it. That's kind of how I've looked at it over the years.
Yeah. I think my favorite bosses that I've had in the past have been my bosses that I could laugh with.
Yep. Absolutely.
Now that you mentioned it, I just thought about that. I was like, yeah, I can remember just having like side-splitting laughter with one of my favorite bosses.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have those stories. There was a guy that he's a Kroger now. He's vice president. He worked for me as a director. And he was such a passionate, high-driven guy. One day we pull into a divisional office for a divisional visit, and we're in a Jeep. And he's so excited about getting in and talking about what it is we're doing. He didn't put the car in park. He just tried to turn it off. And he goes, these foreign cars. And I said, Troy, it's a Jeep. You got to put it in park and then turn it off. And we made, he laughed at himself. We laughed at him. We told that story, and I'd do something similarly stupid and they'd laugh at me. Right. So, it's okay to laugh on company time.
Yeah. It can be fun. Like it's, and I think you mentioned this, but you've been surprised by mentorship too. Like I'll have people come up to me at a conference and they'll be, oh, I consider you a mentor. I'm like, really? I didn't even realize that, just through conversations, even though they may have been short, you've had an effect on people. And I think, on our pre-call, we talked about this too, is you got to pay attention to those little quick moments because sometimes those can have a huge impact.
Absolutely. When I was at Walmart, the COO over there, to whom I reported to for a period of time, used to call those things TNT, tiny noticeable things.
Yeah, I love it.
And whether that was acknowledging the meat cutter in the back room or going into the back room and saying hello to the guy or gal unloading the truck, or if I was walking a store, where is our store detective team? I want to say hello. Why aren't they with us? And it's the little things that go such a long way. And I think as a leader, that's where you gain the respect of folks. Like I say, it's easy to be the boss. It's more difficult to be the leader. And I think leaders, and this is cliche, I know, but they lead by example, right? It's not what you say, but it's what you do that really matters. Because you can say anything,
right?
But it's what you do and how you carry yourself as a leader that I think you get far more credit for as you look back on your career than you thought.
Absolutely. Well, and at the end of my career, I want to be able to sleep well and know that I did the right things, as I'm sure you do too.
Yep.
So,
yep, absolutely.
This has been a great conversation, Mike, and I hope that you would come back and talk to me again because I have about a million other things I'd like to talk to you about.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I'm a huge proponent of the magazine. I think you're doing outstanding work over there. Really helps advance our business. Thrilled to see that, print is up and in demand. And all that says to me is you folks are doing all the right things. And I'm just excited to be a part of it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for your continued support too on the foundation and the magazine. We really appreciate you. And I hope you have a great holiday.
And to you.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon, Mike.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.